Hi, Dr. Ali, you're on mute.
Thank you so very much. Good morning, good afternoon to each and every one of you around the world. This is Dr. Amina Ali. We are coming to you from the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. And today we have an amazing, amazing panel with us that is going to be speaking to us about another session of minority mental health. Now, when we think of the term minority, we always think of those less than. And less than meaning inaccessible, underserved, unserved, and those in warring countries that are in development. So when we look at this, we have to look at the sense and sensibility of how they are accessing mental health. Well, today is session 2 on minority mental health for the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. And today we have a panel like no other. They are a panel of experts that have come to be an asset to the understanding of what it is to live as those that are in the mix. And they are to live as those that will hold a great credence to what it is that we need to do for their help. We are going to touch on different issues that are affected with mental health and its access. And then we're going to list and learn some of the solutions that we have today. So if all things are right and in order, we're going to begin in prayer. Dear Lord, we come to you today to thank you for the understandings of what we are come to do today. We thank you for the ability in technology to be successful in this, and we pray for any mishaps to be cleared up. We equally pray that those that have come to give their expertise will come with a pride and humility that is only understood by service to you. And we ask that you release their ego, you release their pride in self, and release the information that is selfless and directed for you. We also enter into an entity of knowing that this information is to go out to the good of all, and that we should enjoy this with the goodness that you have given to us. For all these things and in the many names that we call you, Amen. Thank you so very much. Your Excellencies, High Commissioners, Ambassadors, Emissaries, Diplomats, Dignitaries, Fellows, and my brothers and sisters that are here to support. And I call you that because the moment that you came to support is the moment that you became family. And today we're going to speak on an issue that touches another aspect of our family, a cousin of ours in the country of India. And this is going to be a tell-all for what it is that is needed to be known. We got experts that not only know about it, but can speak through it as far as mental health. So Minority Mental Health Series number 2, which is Caste, Class, and Culture, Minority Mental Health in India. And today's guest is going to be Victoria. And I give her doctor because I guess in the inception, I was told she was a doctor, but I think it is coming. And I am so blessed to know her and so honored to be a part of her and Timothy, who I will explain. But as you know, we like for you to explain who you are. So in introducing you, Victoria Gilal Singh is a mental health professional, clinical psychologist, and she is from Trinidad and Tobago, working in both islands and very, very prolific in the topic. She just had a TV show. I wish I would have had the screen up to be able to show you. She just had a interview that she just did not too long ago, maybe like this week or so. And it was prime. I loved it. I loved the topic. I love the way she enumerates the truth in it. And that's why she's here. And then we have Dr. Timothy Sharon, mental health professional, clinical psychologist, and he too is from Trinidad and Tobago. But they are both of the Indian descent. And that is what's most important to this, that they are from the descent of the Indian people. And these are true parameters that we like to talk on in the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. We don't like people to speak for other people. We like the voice of the people to speak for themselves. And that's why, without further ado, I'm going to ask Madam Victoria, if you could unmute your mic, tell us a little bit about yourself and explain to us why you got into mental health, first of all.
Hi, good day, everybody. How are you all? So, Victoria Sunaranji Lalsing, I'm really happy to join you all today. It's so interesting that you would ask that question because I wanted to be a lawyer. And by happenstance, I did a psychology course in my first year at university, and then that was it. Because I believe that in that intro to psychology course, I learned more about myself than I had known in my up to then 18 years of life. And it was so dynamic, and it wasn't a challenge at all to want to learn about this topic. You're in university and you think, oh gosh, stress, so much work, but this was not work for me. This was exciting. And then as I continued to grow in it and as I continued to learn more, the more you learn something is the more you realize you don't know. So it's been a pleasure in my 7+ years experience so far to be able to use this knowledge to help other people learn about themselves. Because there is so much power in learning, just being a more aware of something. It has so much power in it. And that is probably one of the key things that I still practice with my clients as I try to empower them through knowledge.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that insight because sometimes you and it's funny that you wanted to go into law because that was what I was wanting to go to, criminal justice. I wanted to work with those that were affected by the care and custody of police officers. And this was back in the, gosh, I'm dating myself, the early 80s. I was in school, I was in college. So dating myself a bit. But I think that what I saw was that there was a need for special and intricate details into law, and went in the military and they had an opening in medicine and the rest is history. So I think, it does, when you know it's for you, it does come easy. It does come very deliberate and it flows. So it's not like it just happens right now. It's all through your career. That's when you know you're in your space. So thank you so very much. And Timothy, we are going to open you up. We are going to see Dr. Timothy Sharon, who is a clinical psychologist. Give us, unmute your mic, Timothy, and tell us a little bit why you went into mental health before we get into our questions.
Hi, morning, everyone. Before we get into our questions, a bit about me, why I decided to pursue counseling and psychology is more of a calling. So
nice.
From a very early age, I always used to be the listening ear, the lending support to not only me, not only my family, but my friends as well. So it really, so I thought, like, how best can I use this? Because it really not only helped me, but not only helped my friends and family, but it also made me feel good as well. So I really thought it was a calling. So that's why I pursued that passion, and and that's what brought me here today. So thank you.
Yes. And we're so glad to have you here because it is definitely a need, especially in your niche. And what better niche outside of psychology than to speak about your people, and that is a huge, huge piece. And so many times we don't have representation for our own. We are so busy in other communities or helping other people that we don't stop and think about our own. And I'm so glad that both of you have gone to this measure of understanding the help that is needed for the people of India. So our first questions go to Victoria because, of course, ladies first. So the first question is, Madam Gilal Singh, if you can answer this. Discrimination and stigma in the caste system perpetrates discrimination and has a detrimental impact on mental health. Individuals from lower castes often face social exclusion, humiliation, and unequal treatment, leading to increased vulnerability to mental health issues. Expound on that for a minute and allow us to know the insights as it relates to the people of India.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I won't go too much into the history, but the history is important. It's very relevant. So if you look at the caste, basically what it is, it's like an organism. It's very complex. to understand the dynamic of it. It's basically how people are separated. So there would be, if you go to India, you would find that there are differences in religion, many different religions. And then as you go to separate the religions further, you find that there's a hierarchy that exists where the highest caste is meant to be the ones who are more educated, and then the lowest class are meant to be the ones who do labor. So the very lowest caste that exists are the ones who would do jobs like, you know, janitorial work, cleaning out the sewers, just those very unattractive type jobs. Now, what's very interesting is that India, prior to colonization, there was no caste system. There were people of different skin colors, and that had to do with where the equator lies. Because if we're familiar with the map, you know, the equator passes through India. So there are parts of India that has hotter temperatures, and there are parts with colder temperatures. And as we know, the human body adapts. So of course, in hotter temperatures, a hotter climate, the skin color changes and it darkens to be able to tolerate the heat. Whereas in the colder temperatures, the skin color is fairer. And those people would have been educated, they would have held jobs. The only difference in probably your socioeconomic was what your job would have been. But then when the Europeans came, what they actually did was this separation and this segregation, they put it into law. So then it became a law that there were the Brahmins who would have been the top, and they would have been the highest caste. And then there was this misconception where it changed. Now the highest caste, or the people who got the better jobs, were not the people who were the most educated, but they were the people who were born into the caste. So all of a sudden, it stopped being that my education and my academic capability or my ability to do a job well got me that job, and it was more a matter of where I was born, who I was born to, what my descendants did, what their work was. Now, the caste has since been outlawed because India is actually quite a progressive society. I'm all the way here in Trinidad. I'm in the Western world, you know, so the caste from there to here, we don't have a presence of the caste, say, operational in our country the way it might be in India. But in India, it's been outlawed. And what that means is that there should legally no longer exist a caste. However, if you go to the most rural villages, you find that there still is that discrimination. There still is that stigma, even though it's outlawed. And in those villages, of course, access to resources, education, and all of that is lower. So you find that there's a perpetuation of that caste, which now is nowhere representative to what it had been, but it does still exist in these smaller areas where they in their own village, the lower class, that is, the lower caste, sorry, they in their own villages may not have access to education. And even if they are educated in their villages, the quality of education that is available to them is not probably to the standard as into the cities. So then when it comes to furthering education, such as universities, etc., they may not be as competent as others who are educated with higher standards to have access to university education. So it's no longer their limits. It's no longer, you know, the government that's keeping them down or the law or anything. It's more the limit to the access for where they are. Now, this is huge when it comes to the impact on mental health, because of course, if you are in a society, if you are born where you believe that, you know, once upon a time, there was this thing that was holding me back, it becomes part of your psyche. It's part of your generation. Your ancestors would have spoken about it. And because it's there, it is something that can be crippling to how you feel about yourself, your own self-competence, your own self-confidence, your ability to motivate yourself further and beyond.
Nice, nice. And I appreciate that insight because it gives the pathology of how it happened and then how it continued. So it really was a freak accident, if you would. And I say that in the sense of it wasn't intended to continue. And once it was outlawed, it was almost like it didn't reach certain people, so they perpetuated it. And even when they did know that it was outlawed, it was so comfortable that they just held on to it. And that reminds me of something that, and I want to welcome in NYU and Fordham University today. And they're going to be the students that are listening in. They're from international studies, international diplomacy, political science, and law, Fordham Law. So these are the students that are listening to you today, and I want to welcome them. And a couple of them are saying on the chat that it's really unfortunate that you resemble those people of the African descent that came over on the transatlantic slave trade. And I know you've heard the parallel, how once we got here and we were enshrined into the colonialism of being enslaved, then once it was outlawed, it took a while for that word to get to certain aspects of the South and the deeper South and the rural areas. And then once it did in 1865, it took the slave owners even a little bit longer. Here it is, 1865. We're just past 1900s, and 1865 was when slaves were free. But it took until like 1920 until everyone was actually declared. We're now in 2023, so 103 years that we have been free, in essence. And it bothers me in that sense when we speak about that, because just like it says in the chat here, it says it is understood that we have only been free a little over 100 years. And where we have come from allows us not to perpetrate that again. As I'm listening to in the Indian culture, they have decided that this is no longer a moray for their society. And they are allowing the truth of who the person is to shine. That is true development, even in an undeveloped country. Well, India is developed, very developed. And I understand where they're coming from as far as the mindset. But I do want to correct you. This is a student from Fordham Law. They are very developed, both technically, scientifically, and academically. They are very, very developed. And the understanding is that the caste and class system is not needed anymore. So just understand where they are. Everyone has the propensity to be the better person, and what they are is delineated by where they are in society and what they serve. So if you need people in medicine, they will go into that organization that will promote the medicine, will encourage them to go into medicine because this village needs medicine. So just understand that and not to defend you in any way, Victoria, but it's very, very, very good, especially in this day and age, that since this is the age of information, that we disseminate the proper information. So when a student writes, and it was very important for me to bring that up now, that is in an undeveloped country, I want them to understand that you are developed.
And may I, Your Excellency, just add to that, and if I could just comment a little bit on it. India is actually probably number 6 or number 7 in terms of developed countries in the world.
See?
And their healthcare is actually, their health and wellness is actually one of the top in the world. And it's so interesting that you talked about slavery, because for slavery, what it is, even people who are descendants, there is still that mindset that they're still fighting for freedom, and they have to fight. Well, you don't have to fight. Freedom is yours. You were born in a society where you are free. However, discrimination still occurs.
Correct.
And, it's a parallel here, because in India, I would have, in research for this topic, I would have spoken to various professionals, looked at different videos. And I think just about 4 days ago, there was an interview that BBC released right in the UK, where they're saying that the caste system is so very prevalent in the UK, because other people still have this discriminatory mentality, even though in the home country where it all started, it's outlawed, and the government has actually taken steps to try to get the lowest class, which are called the Dalps. They have reservation jobs for them. So in other words, there is a certain percentage of the lowest class that can access jobs that no other class can access. And the government has done this to try to show the country that when we say we outlaw this, we outlaw it. It's not like we're just saying that for political reasons. And India has progressed so much in terms of trying to attain this equality for their people. And I mentioned healthcare is one of the tops. And in India, they don't separate physical healthcare from mental health care.
Healthcare.
It's all wellness. So how they treat it. So their medicine is Ayurvedic medicine.
Right.
And in Ayurveda, you treat the body, you treat the mind.
That's right. Thank you. And I'm glad you touched on that, because that's a whole other event that we're going to be going into, the difference between allopathic and naturopathic medicines. And that's going to definitely be a topic. So thank you. Okay, Mr. Timothy, we're going to bring you in and we're going to ask you your first question. Thank you, Victoria. I really appreciate that. We are going to ask you, we have a statement here and we're going to ask you to speak on this so that we can have a greater understanding as to what it is that we need to do, and then what it is that is necessary for people to understand, especially with the comment that was made in Fordham. We really need to dig into this. So intersections with gender and mental health. The intersection of caste and gender further complicates mental health outcomes. Albeit women, for example, face multiple forms of discrimination, including caste, gender, and class-based oppression, they may experience higher levels of psychological distress and limited access to mental health care. Now, expound on that a little bit more and tell us how that represents in India, especially today.
Right. Good morning again to everyone. Good morning. So just to begin, I just wanted to reemphasize what Ms. Jalal Singh was saying. The caste system has been outlawed since 1950s. So, when I was doing my research, it was very hard to find that information on the gender, the diversification between the genders accessing this mental care. However, they did share a lot of information on how it may affect somebody. So they mentioned that like if somebody were to go through the caste system, it undermines the individual's sense of self-worth and identity, causing feelings of shame and humiliation and a diminished sense of belonging. So it will be hard to differentiate who it would affect more, either the woman or the man, because both would experience trauma differently.
Yes.
So for some people, it may be very severe, which ultimately leads to suicide. So versus somebody who is able to cope a lot better because of the resilience, and a lot of factors assist in the resilience when coping with trauma, such as a strong support network. So if there are family and friends who are in similar situations and who are able to empathize, that helps a lot. And women tend to, just from the research, women tend to open up and share their feelings a bit more versus men. So if we look at the statistics when it comes to suicide, the statistics for the men are a lot higher versus the women. So that is something to note and to encourage the men of our society to if you're feeling distressed, to share their feelings with one another, which helps to overcome this distress. If I can speak a bit more to what Ms. Jalal was saying as well, the mindset compared to, because I've been doing a lot of reading as well, and it was interesting what I came across where they were saying, I was reading the readings of Thomas Sowell, right, who had a number of documents on this literature, and he was asking the question. He was focusing more on the culture of the African American society, and he was saying, do the African Americans preserve? Do they have their authentic culture, or was it robbed from them? And what he's suggesting is that they adopted the culture of the rednecks, where the rednecks wouldn't pay that much attention to education. They love Christianity, they love Jesus, and they normally result in physical conflicts and so forth. And the African Americans adopted that. So it's interesting when we look at the Indian culture, when it comes to preserving our authentic culture. I can speak as a Trinidadian where I could say we have preserved our culture. So one of our public holidays is Indian Arrival Day. So the days when we arrive to Trinidad, that's a public holiday in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's and we celebrate that as a public holiday. We also have Diwali, which is a really big festival celebrated not only by Hindus but non-Hindus as well. So our culture is really appreciated and preserved in that sense. And we don't really have the mindset of a victim mentality where you come in there saying how we came from a caste system. I mean, if I could be so fast, I could share something that my grandmother shared with me, where she was sharing that a lot of the people who came from India back in their time, the caste system was present, and most of the people who left were of the lower caste, and that's why in Trinidad presently a lot of people change their names. So right now we have a lot of Maharajas, and that's just to empower themselves in a sense. So it wasn't, they came with not the mindset oh, I can't believe how badly I'm treated, but in a sense that I'm gonna, and Maharaja means, if you look at it up the meaning, it's a great leader or a king in a sense. And if you look at the phone directory in Trinidad, a lot of Maharajas. So I mean, it just shows you the mindset that the people from India came here with, and they work really hard and they focus on education, and a lot of the Indian population, they thrive on that. So they're always pushing their children to go to school, learn to read and stuff, because they see how valuable that is. And it really changed our society for the better from back where they came from to where we are now. So that's a bit, yeah.
And I thank you for that, because although our experiences, of course, are totally different, you came here voluntarily, we were brought here by force. There
Right.
was a huge understanding that the pride that you feel is because you have come to a land that has accepted you. And one of the misnomers that we have as people of color, as you see, when's the last time you saw a police officer mishandle someone of the Indian culture? When's the last time that you saw a woman of Indian descent go into a hospital to have a baby and be killed? This is the disclaimer. So the victim mentality that you speak about, I don't think is perpetrated in the African-American community as a rule of thumb. I think it is because of the frustration of the annihilation of having children and birthing children, not knowing if they're going to outlive you, and not knowing if that is going to be your lot in life. Is this going to be all there is to who we are and who we exist as people? And I'm very, very proud that you said that it became a part of your culture. The India, well, you said Indian Welcome Day. Is that what it is? You said
Arrival Day.
Arrival Day. India Arrival Day is a part of that. If we were to go back and to stay in on African Arrival Day, there would be a lot of people that would be discouraged by that.
Right. Understood.
And they would be very, very hurt by that. And likely so, because the people that are living today are ancestors of those that encapsulated us and brought us here. So there's a guilt, we call it indigenous guilt, which is where it's coming from. You didn't do it, but your grandfather did, and you have to live with the stigma of knowing that somebody in your family enslaved people. So they go along with this idea of trying to get into the mindset of the mental health field to try to circumnavigate a lot of that. And I'm noticing that people are trying to, oh, well, let me help you understand that. Well, you didn't help us get into it. So to stop feeling guilty about what it is. They go into mental health because they feel as though they can fix what we feel. And that is so that they can feel better about what their grandfather did. and it's a round robin, like Victoria said, it's a circular thing because they keep feeling guilty and we keep telling them to stop. And that guilt is making them feel more guilty. So they keep going. So I think in saying that, I'm very glad you brought up this point because it is very, very poignant to what it is you spoke about, one, and then the barriers that come to that. And I'm going to have you speak on that, your second part of this, where it says barriers to seeking help, because I did bring that in intentionally because I wanted you to see, the parallel as you speak on to the stigma associated with mental health issues and the caste system and how it can create significant barriers to seeking help. Many individuals may fear social ostracism or negative repercussions if they disclose their mental health concerns, big in the African community, leading to underreporting, delayed intervention, and limited access to appropriate mental services. So speak on the impetus of the pride issue, because that's what it is. It's a huge pride issue in seeking help, and that is a barrier. So can you speak a little bit on that, please?
Yes. So a bit about seeking help. I wanted to share a bit of I want to speak a bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay.
Right. So at the top is self-actualization, which is the desire to be the most that one could be. At the bottom, however, is physiological needs, followed by safety needs. So a lot of the people in the caste system, let's say, their focus would primarily be on the physiological needs and the safety needs. Above that would be more love and belonging and esteem. So unfortunately, if the needs lower down in the hierarchy must be satisfied before we can attend to the higher needs. So unfortunately, the people who were in the caste system, who were in like systems of slavery as well, they wouldn't primarily take notice of their trauma and focus more on survival. So they didn't recognize the need to access mental health care and so forth. So and it's a tradition that we face here in Trinidad as well, because I remember last time I was here, I was speaking about the culture, and it's still prevalent where, people, like if people speak about how they're feeling depressed, it's like, hey, what's something wrong with you? Like, stop talking like that, go and do work, that's just laziness. And it's really hard for people to break out of that mindset. So it's really unfortunate that the people didn't see the value in accessing mental health care. When it comes to barriers, however, I think there was no discrimination in the sense that, well, here in Trinidad at least, where both men and women are encouraged to access the services and have open access to the services as well. So I hope that was helpful. And yeah,
absolutely. And you touched on what it is that I needed you to touch on as far as the levels to this. That was great that you included Maslow. I remember that in high school when we were in intro to psychology. And I remember hearing it for the first time, and I was like, "Who is this Maslow? And how did how did he come up with this?" And I remember asking. I had to been about 11th grade, so that's what, the 70s, beginning of 80s. And I saw that as like my in as to the humanistic side of it, the humanistic side of serving. Didn't realize I was going to touch on it, many years later, but it was how you serve. Maslow has that self-actualization. And I think it was, what is it? Esteem next. Then what is it?
Love and belonging. Yeah.
Belonging, and then safety, and then physiological needs. Right. See, I remember.
Very good.
And I know that this is a huge piece for what it is that we do as a people, but I didn't realize that was going to be the tenet for my service later on. So when you mentioned that, I just perked up. I was like, oh my goodness, he said it. But I like the fact that you added that in there because it allows us to see the levels at which we are in that either nurturing or that survival. And that survival piece is very, very true, because once we get to physiological needs, it's more of once we get to self-actualization, the physiological needs are lessened, but where it's assumed that they're cared for because it's a what's the word I want to use? It's a second nature at that point. You know, by the time you get to self-actualization, the physiological needs will automatically be met subconsciously. And I think that that's a huge piece when we talk about mental health, and we're going to swing back into that with Madam Victoria, because that is allowing us to understand where that lies in our life. If we can look at that chart, if we could like pull it up on Google and look at that chart and see it as we go along, it can actually be a mantra for us, because we can see where we are in our life versus where the levels are, and then be able to give a tantamount of perspective to where we are in mental health. If we're still on physiological needs, then we know that we have some ways to go, and vice versa. If we're at self-actualization, we have come a long way. But like Victoria said, sometimes when you think you know something, you realize you really don't know anything. And I think that's where the coupling of the disparity comes in. So Madam Victoria, so thank you, Timothy. I really appreciate your insight. We have one more question if we have time for you, Timothy, but Madam Victoria, if you can, please explain the socioeconomic disparities that we were just talking about. The caste-based inequalities that contribute to socioeconomic disparities, limiting access to resources, education, employment opportunities, and healthcare. These disparities can exacerbate mental health challenges, as individuals from lower caste may experience higher levels of stress, poverty, and limited social mobility. So you touched on it in your first question, but I really want you to go into how it rationalizes in society. I know we understand the tangent of the words, but how does it really rationalize in society as to what it is that we need and how we access it, please?
Right. Thank you very much, Excellency. So, we did talk about it a little bit about the economy of India growing, and especially the caste system. Timothy would have mentioned since the 1950s, it's been outlawed, but it still certainly exists in the mindset of the people. Now, I would have also mentioned that what the government has done is they have created reserve jobs, because India is very much about taking care of the diaspora. And what you would notice, so for example, we have the High Commission of India here in Trinidad, and they do a lot of work with the diaspora in Trinidad. And Trinidad is such a melting pot. You wouldn't be familiar with the dish callaloo, but we have a dish here that's basically you throw a bunch of stuff in a pot and melt it down, and it tastes so good. And Trinidad is a melting pot of cultures. So Timothy would have mentioned Indian Arrival Day. We also have an Emancipation Day that recognizes the freedom of those of African descent. And we also we celebrate, a Chinese holiday, and we have a Shout Out Baptist Day. And we celebrate Eid, which is a Muslim holiday. So Trinidad is really an exotic island, but we came from somewhere, right?
Yes.
And in terms of today, we're talking about this caste that we came from, and India now, present day India, out of the colonization that they were once under, is now basically trying to retake and rebuild. And of course, that takes time, because as you would have mentioned, when slavery was abolished, it took time. And even though it's moving through, and the cities are now seeing it, and people feel a sense of equality, etc., when you go into the villages and you have that mindset that I am of lower caste, I cannot achieve, that is more the thing that exacerbates the mental challenges, and that is more the thing that prevents them from accessing the healthcare and the mental health care that they so deserve. Because as I mentioned before, India is one of the leading world healthcare hubs. If you think about it, they export so much their doctors go all over the world to, they have a huge medical tourism field where people go there for surgeries, for treatment, for all of these kinds of things. People even go there for spiritual and mental edification, so in terms of the socioeconomic factor, I would say that it is more financial reasons why people may not access and less to do with the caste. However, I really don't want to minimize the effect of the caste, because even though the caste system does not exist anymore the way it did before, here it still exists. And the thing about it is, I can ask a person who has broken a limb to run up the stairs, and that is an unrealistic request because they do not have the physical ability to move that way to go up the stairs. They don't have the motor coordination, they don't have the tool, the physical, functioning leg to help
Right.
them do that. It's the same thing with someone who has a mental challenge. You can ask someone to put their best foot forward in their education, study hard, focus. But how can I focus when in my unconscious mind there lies a thing that I am not even aware of, that is devouring my motivation, or that is keeping me low, or that is holding me in this self-concept and this state, and Timothy talked about it, this lower sense of self, that I am unworthy of achieving this great grand thing. And for those people, what you find is that lack of motivation and that mindset cripples them into even trying. So if they were to actually go to an organization and say, I feel as though I need counseling, that will happen. So it's not necessarily that's keeping them from accessing healthcare. What's keeping them is whether or not they would go in the first place, whether or not they feel as though they can access it. And I mean, it's very real, because the same way this mentality exists in people of who would have been of lower class caste, it also exists in the minds of people who would have been of higher caste. So then what that means is that you have Indians discriminating against Indians. And that is just the worst possible thing that you can imagine.
Right. We have it.
No.
We have it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's where you should be of the sense, and you see that comes from an insecurity as well. Because any person who pushes somebody else down means that they have to make you feel bad in order for them to feel good. So that's their own thing that they need to deal with, because my elevation has nothing to do with you.
Right.
You can't, because you can't compare two people. I could compare me to me yesterday and to me tomorrow, but I can't compare me to you because we're two completely different people, right? So, so in terms of that socioeconomic disparity, it exists more in the mind. And then because of that, you have the continued stress, you have the poverty. Timothy would have mentioned that in terms of the mental health with respect to gender, that it's more prevalent in men. And if you look at the timeline, what you would find is that the caste system exists at a time where the men were the ones who had to work and provide for their families. So if a man could only get a job that took him away for hours, but then his salary was very small, then he would not be able to provide for his wife and children. And therefore, he would feel a sense of worthlessness. He would feel, he would feel that more. So when it did exist, that is what would have happened. But now, and the thing is, when I heard about this, because I actually spoke to someone in the High Commission of India here, and they were the ones who did mention to me, and I did further research on the reservation jobs. It's telling people, hey, we have this for you. Your government has this for you. Come and access this job. People of higher class can't get this job. This job is for you, That is the criteria, that you are the only ones. There are a certain number of jobs where they are the only ones who can access it. So therefore, they are the only ones who, it's like a free, like you didn't even need to do a job interview. It's just like, hey, this job is yours. And you access it. And then you have that ability to earn more, to access higher education. And the thing about the caste, if you look at how it would have progressed, is that they say it takes a number of generations.
Yeah.
So if one generation was a caste of maybe they would clean sewers, but they were able to elevate themselves, then maybe they would be farmers. They would still be laborers, they would still be a lower class, but still a higher one. And then those farmers would work really hard, sacrifice to educate their children. So, for example, my father, my grandfather was a farmer. He planted and he sold. And then my father also did that because he loved it. So he did it as a
Oh,
hobby. But then my father was in the military. My
nice.
father didn't have anything beyond a primary school education. So primary school in Trinidad takes you up until age 11. So he
Okay.
didn't have education beyond that. But then my father has daughters who both have master's degrees.
Okay.
And my son, who's 5, is already running circles around me.
See,
So, so that is how it goes along generations. And you don't only see that in Indian society, you see that in other cultures as well, because parents, well, in other races, parents sacrifice for their children. And I think that, that is the thing that we need to look at, that psychological distress. It passes along the generations.
Yes.
And instead of passing it along, instead of telling them, oh, well, we were oppressed, this is what had happened to us. I mean, of course, caution, because we have to give our children caution, because there are people who are discriminatory. So we have to do that. But it should not be what we focus on. It should be, babe, you know what? You have more opportunities than me, and I am going to support you. So you go. I didn't do it. You do it. You go. And that should be the drive. And then over time, what it does is it creates or it instills in that generation to come that they have the access. Because I would have said before, we are now all born into freedom. They have the access to things. And then once they have that belief that they have the access, then they will seek to actually get that help. So it would take away that cripple that they have in their mind, that crippling mental belief, that belief that, oh, I don't deserve this.
Mhm.
And as Timothy mentioned, he used the absolute perfect words when he said a
Mhm.
lower sense of self, when he was talking about a lower sense of self-worth. That is the thing. That is the thing that prevents someone from accessing mental health.
That's
And
correct.
I think that is the thing we need to correct.
You're right. And just the wording on that alone would suffice to correct 80% of it. To understand the pathology behind it would also give credence to a little bit more of that change. And I think in some of the questions that I'm seeing, and I'm trying to write them down as I'm as you're speaking, some of the questions that I'm seeing the students write about is speaking on what Timothy had mentioned, and I'm going to bring it to you because I'm going to bring it into the point of disparities. But he said, don't focus on trauma. They don't focus on trauma. They focus on their survival. So some of the disparities that you will see, especially, and I'm pretty sure in the Indian culture, was that, you said that the parents in a realistic world will say, you have more advantages than I do. So let's focus on that. But when you are dealing with how you got here, there does build a little bit of, I don't want to say angst, but there is a bit of trauma that comes from being in a country that didn't provide me with the opportunity, but gave my children an opportunity. It's almost like an underlying resentment that comes because here I am living in the country, and like 20 years ago, I couldn't do this. Now my daughter's able to do this. Like, why couldn't I do it? Nothing has changed. I mean, when I say nothing has changed, I mean, nothing has changed like demographically or geographically or even academically. It's just almost like people just woke up and the light switch went on. So I see that in our community that a lot of the elders are kind of maligned with, wow, why couldn't I do that? And, you know, and they feel kind of hurt, not focusing on the hurt per se, but there is a trauma that is associated with that. When you are told in the caste system, class system, that you cannot be anything more than a sewer worker. When you're told that that's the only jobs for you, and then automatically the government wakes up one day and says, okay, so now here's some jobs that only you can access that are higher than a sewer worker. Well, one would say, well, why can't I access all the jobs? Why do you have to just give me the jobs that you want me to have and have access to only these jobs? So it undermines the thing where maybe I'm not as worthy of the other jobs, and these are the jobs that you feel I'm worthy of. But like you mentioned, in that comparison, you can't compare one to the other. How do you know you don't have a new neurophysicist in that group of sewer workers, but you are only allowing them a certain amount of jobs in a certain area for certain people that you don't even have to interview for? But that's not really where I am. I'm into, I don't know, Ayurvedic medicine. And you know, I really want to be a doctor in that realm, but I'm sitting here cleaning sewers, and my father cleaned sewers. So I guess I have to do it, but I want to do this. So I say this in the disparity because I really want to, I love the way you guys touched on how that transcends, how there's an intersectionality with that, and how that works with the gender bias, how that works with the generational bias, how the children come along and they're just bopping along and they're just becoming doctors and lawyers, and the parents are just looking at them like, wow, like, how did this happen? Like, how did it, wow. I mean, I'm proud that my child is a doctor, but then why was I not worthy? You know, that type of thing. So the self-worth has to be built on an understanding of not necessarily where you are in the world in that comparison, but what is accessible and available to you in what you are doing for the understanding of how you can give and what you can give. And I think that says that just speaks mounds to what it is that we are going to. So thank you. I'm saying this to say thank you because it allows me to open up a little bit more. And we may have a part 2 to this because there's a lot of similarities that we can work on and formulate. And there's a lot of knowledge in this room about how it has worked for a group of people and to see how it can work for another group of people. And again, that's all what these events are for, to help give ideas to other groups of people that are going through the same disparity. To get the help. So thank you. I have a few. You're most welcome.
Sorry, can I just one sentence?
Please.
With the reservation jobs, right? These jobs occur in different fields and different areas. However, education is required. So it's not like you can just go get a job and you don't have the education for it. So there is also access to the education. So what it means is that someone from a Dalit class could get educated and they don't need to worry that they are not going to get a job because they came from a Dalit. So what it means is that you get your education, you get your qualifications, you build your competence. And as long as you have that, then there are certain jobs that only you can access. So it's not that, I don't want it to be misunderstood that I could just one day wake up with no education, no qualifications, nothing, and be like, hey, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a doctor, or let me practice Ayurvedic medicine. And the thing about Ayurveda, I mean, just because it's coming up again, you know, it's something that I actually work with and trained with. The thing about Ayurveda is that it is actually available throughout India.
Nice.
That every single person in India can get training in Ayurveda. It's how they live their life. It's part of their lifestyle.
I like it. I like it. And that's because I'm very fond of it as a naturopathic doctor, of course. We had to have it. We had to study it. We didn't study it as deep as I wanted to, but it was an understanding that it was a part of the curriculum. So we had to learn the mind, body, spirit. And it really helped me because a lot of times dealing with obstetrics, you have to deal with the whole person versus just from the belly down. And it allowed me to channel a lot of that knowledge into it. So thank you so very much. For both of you, for about 2 minutes. Oh, no, we don't have enough time on the live stream. The last question. Okay. Okay, so right now, because we have the kids are getting ready to go back to class. They have summer school, so they're getting ready to go back at 11. So in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Timothy to come on and give some gems in the last part, the last ditch effort about I don't know, give us something that relates to access to care, or how you see care to be accessed in India, or different modalities that we can maybe address very, very quickly as to what it is that we can, you can give as a gem, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I just wanted to expand a bit more about what was mentioning earlier about the coping with complex trauma.
Yes.
So there's the survivor versus the victim mentality. So let's just say somebody came down here who went through the caste system. They could cope with that trauma as, why was I born into that caste, versus, you know, I survived, I made it to Trinidad, even though the working conditions were horrendous and was still really deprived of a lot of opportunity. They had a more survivor
Nice.
aspect of that. So what I would, as a gem, to think of the positives, because it's so easy for us to focus on the negative when we experience trauma. So to focus on more the positive, that, hey, I survived and I could make this as a learning experience to others, or to help myself grow. So is the gem I would like to leave.
Yes, thank you. And I love the way you transected that and made a difference in the translation of that. And I really appreciate what it is that you are using for the understanding of what we are seeing in what we are giving, as far as knowledge, and as I mentioned before, the intersectionality of how the two cross. Madam Victoria, if you can you give us a last minute gem, please, and let us know how you are going to close out solutions for what it is that we are going to need, especially in comparison to repeatable programs that work, please.
Right. So, you know, earlier you were mentioning that there is the cycle that goes on with, why can my child do that now and I can't? And there's an answer for that. The answer is because there's more education now. It's because the tools that you have now, and the things that you know now, you didn't know then. And it happened. It's the same thing. Why do government make decisions? Because the things that they know now, they didn't know then. So saying all of that is to say that the tool is continued education. It's forums like these. It's where information goes out. It's where clarification can be given. Because the thing with our minds is that when we're in ambiguous situations, we make things up to fill in the gaps. And then that doesn't always lead us to the right outcomes or the right solutions or actions. But if we are educated, then we are more able to act accordingly and to be functional. And as is for everything that I always do, I would say, if you're ever unsure about if you're acting well or appropriately towards another person, or even towards yourself, just ask yourself if you're being kind. And if you're being kind, the chances that you're doing well.
You are amazing. I love the way you ended with that. And that's a great point to end them. I want to thank Fordham University, NYU, for coming on. The students are coming on. I know you guys are leaving to go to your next class. Thank you so very much for being a part of this. Madam Victoria Jalal Singh and Timothy Sharon, thank you so very much for being here. Of course, as you know, we have our digital thank you that is going to be coming to you today. And I want to ask you to come back. We might have a part 2 to this outside of mental health, just to speak on solutions that deal with those that are of the caste system that have now come forward, and those that are of maybe we'll do a comparative solution for the intersectionality of both cultures, because I see that this is really something that's necessary, and I'm getting really, really excited. I got my juices flowing right now, trying to get matters together into how we can bring these two topics together and speak on it for solutions for both communities. So I thank you so very much for coming. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having a great tenant. I want to thank Madam Ambassador Alana Kling for coming in. She has been more than a great refuge for us, more than a great tenant for us in the community, and as well as representing Trinidad and Tobago. I want to thank those that have come on via live stream, some of the teachers, Professor Armstrong and Professor Neely. Thank you so very much for bringing your class in today and bringing the students into this enlightenment. We will have a part 2 to this, because I can't see it not happening. But thank you all to both of the panelists. Your copy of the event will be to your inbox very, very soon. Good night and be well to all of you. And we thank you again for being here.